It ain't luck, it's destiny.
Hi everyone, this is Halfhand. Welcome to my Season 14 Twisted Fate guide. If you're new to the channel and as a way to give my guide a bit more credibility, I'll kind of shortly introduce myself. So I've been playing Twisted Fate since around 2017, I think. Currently also Master Tier on EOS. Most of you guys might know me from my Twisted Fate guide on MOBA Fire. And yeah, since Twisted Fate is like the most picked mid laner in the game right now, I thought it would be like the perfect opportunity to finally make my guide in video format for all the newer players trying to pick up the champion. So we'll start with the runes. First of all, there's a million different rune setups you can run on Twisted Fate, but in this guide I'll only be covering the rune setup I run for several reasons. Like I could cover the electrocute setup and the spellbook setup and the first strike setup, but then I would make a 10-hour guide and that would be completely stupid. So I'll only be covering the setup that I run. I'm not gonna sit here and say that those other setups are necessarily bad. It's just this setup works for me. This setup got me high ratings, so therefore I'll only be explaining this one. So the first question I get asked often is why I decide to run Comet over Electrocute. There's a few reasons for this. First of all, I would say Arcane Comet is a lot more, I would say noob friendly, maybe that's the wrong word, but it's a lot easier to proc. Electrocute requires you to hit your opponent with like 3 different abilities or auto attacks. And since Twisted Fate is like such short range, it makes it a lot harder to proc it in lane compared to Arcane Comet, where with Arcane Comet you could just walk up to your opponent, hit them with a W, and then you'll proc your Comet, and then you can just walk away. Whereas with Electrocute you would have to walk up, hit them with W, hit them with Q. It would then preferably be a gold card, so you have guaranteed Q hit. You would have to have a stack deck. There's a lot more variables that come into play, whereas Comet is a lot more straightforward, easy to use, I would say. Also, I've compared damage in at the end game screen a lot, and most of the time I tend to have a lot more damage throughout the game with Comet, which is obviously logical because you tend to proc it a lot in laning phase, whereas Electrocute I would say is a more so an ultimate heavy rune. And what I mean by that is when you ult to bot lane or to top lane, you're obviously gonna have more damage from Electrocute, right? But Electrocute is not necessarily gonna help you a lot during laning phase, and that's mainly the reason why I decide to use Comet over Electrocute. Another reason is that if I run Arcane Comet, I'll be able to have 3 options from the sorcery tree, whereas if I would run Electrocute, I would have to choose 3 options from the domination tree. So I'll show you, like for example, the Electrocute setup. I would say the only 2 runes in here that are actually worth going are Eyeball Collection and then, Ultimate Hunter. All these ones are fine, but this top 3 is, in my opinion, not really useful anymore. Taste of Blood used to be very good back in the day. It gave like an insane amount of healing, but ever since they've been like, they nerfed the healing in the game at one point, and they also nerfed Taste of Blood back then. And I would say ever since then, the healing you get from this rune is really negligible, so I don't really like it anymore. So that's another reason why I would say I prefer Arcane Comet over Electrocute, because it allows me to go 3 options in Sorcery tree rather than 3 options in Domination tree. So for the first row, I've tested all of these basically. At the start of the season I thought, okay, I'll be running Rod of Ages. I was quite sure on that item pretty quickly because of how cheap it was and stuff. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna replace my mana flow band with a Nimbus Cloak because I don't feel like I need the mana, because I already have a lot of mana from my Rod of Ages. But I feel like they nerfed Nimbus Cloak a lot as well, and I feel like the movement speed you get from it, it's nice, it's okay, but I feel like Mana Flow Band just gives you more value. Yes, you already have a lot of mana from going Catalyst into Rod of Ages, but I feel like for your early laning phase, for example, just the extra mana helps a lot. And basically if you go Mana Flow Band and you have Rod of Ages, you're never gonna run out of mana in the game ever. So that's why I choose to go Mana Flow over Nimbus Cloak, or even Nullifying Orb. I've tried Nullifying Orb. I think it could be okay in specific matchups, like maybe some like a mage with a lot of damage early on. That's maybe a game where Nullifying Orb could come in handy, but I would say like to kind of make the setup a bit more standard, I think Mana Flow Band will help you out in basically almost all games. So I would almost always go Mana Flow Band here. So for the second row, I'm running Absolute Focus. Reasoning behind this is to get to the threshold level 9 in terms of ability power. To quickly explain this, at level 9, Twisted Fate has 5 points in his queue. And if you have enough ability power, you will be able to one-shot the backline caster creeps in the minion wave, which makes it so it's really easy to push in waves. But you need to be able to get to the ability power threshold to do that. And there's like this sweet spot when like you decide to go certain runes or certain items, right? For example, if I would not buy any AP items, I would not have enough ability power to one-shot the backline, right? But if you run my build and my runes, you will be able to get to the threshold basically 95% of your games. So that's the reason why I run Absolute Focus over Celerity or even Transcendence. I've tried replacing Absolute Focus with Transcendence, but I've noticed that I would not be able to get to the threshold every game. So there would be like these awkward moments where I would queue the minion wave at level 9 and all the minions would have like 1 or 2 HP, which makes it so like I would have to go and auto attack them again to last at them, or my minions would be killing the minions, so therefore I would be losing CS. That's my reasoning behind going Absolute Focus. It makes it so you get to the threshold a lot easier, basically. For the third row, I'm running Gathering Storm. I've tried all these setups. I think Scorch and Waterwalking are both also fine. The reason why I don't go Scorch is because I would say, I mean, Twisted Fate is not really a lane bully. Most of the time when you play Twisted Fate, you basically just try to survive your laning phase. You can punish your opponent if he mispositions, obviously, but I would say Scorch is like a rune that you would run on a mage that really bullies his lane opponent out of lane, which is not really Twisted Fate's identity. Waterwalking could be nice if you like roam a lot, but I would say most of the time if you play Twisted Fate, you tend to just roam with your R anyway, so you're not really like walking into river all the time anyway. And there is no denying that Gathering Storm is by far the best scaling rune in the game. I would also say if, like, I would assume most of you guys are playing in, let's say, I don't know, gold and below, where games tend to go a bit longer. So you'll be playing like 30 to 40 minute average games. As you can see, like you get 80 ability power if you're in a 40-minute game from this rune, which is completely crazy, right? That's basically an extra item. So that's the reason why I run Gathering Storm as well. So for my secondary tree, I'm running Domination, as you can see. I used to run Inspiration tree actually, with Cosmic Insight and Minion Dematerializer, but since they've been buffing the AP items and since they buffed Twisted Fate's AP ratios, you actually don't need Minion Dematerializer anymore to one-shot the backline if you run my runes and my items. So that's why I don't run Inspiration tree anymore. So yeah, I run Domination, Eyeball Collection, and Ultimate Hunter. The reason for Eyeball Collection is basically the same reason as Absolute Focus, just to get a bit more ability power so I can one-shot a backline level 9. And I mean, other options here I would say are not really that good anyway. In the last row, I would say all of these are fine options. I decided to go Ultimate Hunter because with the new AP items, they've taken away a bit of the ability haste in some of them. Like for example, I think Zhonya doesn't give ability haste anymore. I think Lichbane gives less ability haste as well, or maybe even no ability haste at all. I'm not certain on that. Anyway, there's less ability haste in your items. So that's why I would say Ultimate Hunter is nice to have, because then at least you'll have your ultimate on a bit more of a lower cooldown. Not to say that all these other options are bad. I think Treasure Hunter could be good because it allows you to get to your Rod of Ages faster if you get kills. Ingenious, I wouldn't go Ingenious, I think, because you don't really have any a lot of actives on your items on Twisted Fate anyway, except for Zonia. But to go this rune just for Zonia is a bit of a waste, I would say. A Relentless Hunter is okay, but I would then probably still just want Ability Haste on my ultimate anyway. So for the rune shards, these actually got changed recently, so I'm not certain yet that this is the best setup. It's just basically the same thing I've always ran, except for now you don't really have armor or magic resist anymore. You have to basically decide between flat health, tenacity and slow resist, and then the scaling health. So I still run attack speed and adaptive force, also because they nerfed Twisted Fate's attack speed early on, so if you don't have points in E, you'll basically have a lower amount of attack speed than you used to have. So I would say therefore I do kinda like the attack speed in my runes. Then this is just flat AP, kinda logical. You would maybe think, okay, I would want the movement speed, because yes, Twisted Fate is a movement speed reliant champ, but then I'm scared that maybe you will not be able to get to the threshold level 9 to one-shot the backline, and 2% movement speed, it's okay, but it's not that significant, I would say. Although I do still have to kind of test it. But it's such like small amounts, like I don't really think this changes that much anyway. So yeah, these are my two options here. And then for the last row, I always go with scaling health. I think flat health is okay as well. But I think if you just play your first few levels safe anyway, I think at level 4 or 5 you already get to that 60 flat health anyway. So yeah, the health scaling I think is a lot better of an option. The tenacity and slow resist, I think this is more so a tank rune. I don't really think this is something you would want on Twisted Fate, unless maybe the enemy team is like full CC, but how often does that really happen? So yeah, health scaling. So that's my rune setup. If you have any questions about my choices or my reasoning behind taking certain runes, feel free to leave them down in the comments and I'll try to respond. So now for the items. As starter items, I always start Doran's Ring and 2 potions basically. This is always the same every game. You don't go Corrupting Potion anymore, by the way. Sometimes I still see people running this. The reason you used to buy this back in the day is because you would then also go Time Warp Tonic in your runes, and then when you were under the effect of a potion, you would have 5% movement speed, that's an insane amount. And that's really helpful on Twisted Fate, because like I said before, Twisted Fate in a way is a movement speed reliant champion, because extra movement speed will allow you to walk up to the enemy easier, and then you'll be able to hit your gold card. But since they nerfed the healing I think you get from Corrupting Pot, and since they also nerfed the movement speed you get from Time Warp Tonic, it's not worth going that anymore. So the standard start is always Doran's Ring plus 2 potions, and this will always be the same every single game. So for your first buy, so basically your first recall, the first time you head to base, which will preferably be at around, I think 1.1k, I think. That's the amount you need to buy all the items that I tend to buy. You'll buy boots, so the tier 1 boots, a Dark Seal, a Ruby Crystal, and then if you have money left, I guess you could go Refillable Potion and even a Control Ward, but this is if you have a lot of money, right? These 3 items are the ones you want to get on your first base. So the reasoning behind it. Boots, because like I said, Twisted Fate is a movement speed reliant champion. The more movement speed you have, the easier it is gonna be to walk up to the enemy to hit your gold card. So it's pretty self-explanatory, allows you to walk into your lane faster. So yeah, boots. Then Dark Seal, I would say this is one of the most underlooked and broken items on AP Twisted Fate, because AP Twisted Fate, I mean as Twisted Fate in general, you tend to roam a lot. You get a lot of assists and a lot of kills if you play the champion properly, right? And with every kill and every assist, you get stacks on this item, and with every stack you have on this item, you get ability power. So this actually goes hand in hand with the champion, which is why I tend to almost buy it every single game. So yeah, that's why I go Dark Seal. And then if you have 10 stacks on your Dark Seal, you can upgrade it to Medjay, and then you just snowball the game so fast, it's gonna be a lot easier to close out. The only thing you have to keep in mind is that if you die, you lose your stacks. So I'm not gonna sit there and say that you have to play extra safe to maintain the stacks. I think that's the wrong approach to the item, but you definitely need to be more aware of your positioning and where you ult to, and yeah, just be more aware in general. But this is for sure a good item to buy on Twisted Fate, and you want to get this on your first base as well, because you will base at level 5 normally, and then when you head back to lane, you're about to hit level 6. So then when you hit level 6, you're gonna be using your first R, which is your first opportunity to get a kill or an assist, and therefore you would kind of want to have the Dark Seal before that first ultimate, right? And then Ruby Crystal, pretty self-explanatory, gives you health, is a component of Rod of Ages, which is what we will be building into. You could replace this with the Sapphire Crystal, but since we are already running Mana Flow Band in our runes, I don't feel like you really need the mana. Twisted Fate is a pretty weak laner as well, so just having the extra health is really handy as well, because it just gives you more survivability. And then, like I said, if you have gold left, you could get refillable potion and a control ward. In terms of refillable potion, buy this item if you're still in laning phase. Like, if you have not bought refillable because you've not had the opportunity, don't buy it 20 minutes into the game when laning phase is already over, because then I would say it's kind of a waste of gold, you know. But if you're still in the laning phase and you're getting poked out a lot, then refillable is the go-to item in terms of healing. It's very gold efficient. It's a lot better than just buying health potions the entire game. So yeah, refillable potion, good option. And then control ward, obviously, you just place this on the map. I'll show you later on in the guide like certain spots where you want to place your wards as well if you play Twisted Fate, so that's a nice item to have as well. So then for the core items, I always go Rod of Ages and Lichbane, and then I'll also place the boots in here as well, because you want to get them early on as well. Oh, okay, Ionian boots. There we go. So the reasoning behind Rod of Ages is because this item basically gives you all the stats that you want on TF. Ability power, health, and mana. It's also very cheap right now. I would say if Riot would make it like 200 or 400 gold more expensive, then I don't think the item is worth going anymore. But since it's so cheap right now, the amount of stats you get from it is insane. So that's why I would say it's the go-to item right now on TF. The reason why I don't go any of these like newer AP heavy items like Storm Surge or Luden's Companion, for example, is because these items don't give any health. And I would say on a champion like TF, which I would say is quite a vulnerable champion, you are quite low range, and in order to make your champion work, you have to like walk up to your opponent to gold guard them, which makes it so other enemies can like easily charge down on you and one-shot you. So that's why I would say just having the extra health gives you a bit more beefiness, a bit more tankiness. Yeah, so that's why I would say Rod of Ages is better than Luden's Companion or Storm Surge. Am I saying these items are bad? No, not necessarily. I think if you play in lower MMR, these items could work like a charm, because in lower MMR people just don't tend to punish you as heavily. But for me, if you play in like, I would say Diamond Plus, where people do tend to punish you heavily if you miss position, having the extra health is just really handy. So yeah, that's my reasoning behind going Rod of Ages. And then as second item, I would probably even place Ionian boots before Lichbane. You don't want to like go Rod of Ages, then Lichbane, and then buy boots. I would put Ionians here. There's some games where I would even buy Ionians before I complete my Rod of Ages. It kind of depends on what amount of gold I recall on, but there will be games where I'll buy my Ionians after I complete my Rod of Ages. So I'll just put it in between here. The reason behind Ionians, very cheap boots. I think the cheapest in the game, together with swiftness. Swiftness boots are also a decent option, I would say, because it gives you a lot of extra movement speed. But these boots give ability haste, which is, I would say, a really nice stat to have on TF. Makes it so you can just dish out more abilities, obviously. And also the summoner spell haste you get in the passive is really handy as well. So you'll have your ghost or your teleport and your flash up a lot sooner as well. So I almost always tend to go Boots of Lucidity, unless the enemy team is like full AP. So let's say they have an enemy, like let's say the enemy mid laner is AP and the enemy jungler is AP, and maybe they have like a support with a lot of CC as well. Then I'll go Mercs. Or if the enemy is full AD, so let's say they have a Zed mid lane and maybe a Kindred and then like a Vayne ADC or something, then I might go Steel Caps as well. So, but let's say in general, like in most games, I'll go Ionian boots. And then as like a third item, I guess, or second item if you don't really count boots, I'll go Lich Bane. This has been like the standard go-to item on TF for I don't know how long. It basically gives you every stat that you want on TF. Ability power, movement speed, ability haste, and then also the passive basically goes hand in hand with TF's kit. Because TF tends to auto attack a lot between his like spell rotations or ability rotations. You get like the extra magic damage from it as well. So yeah, that's why I would say this item is, after Rod of Ages, kind of the go-to. 8% movement speed is an insane amount as well. So yeah, after Rod of Ages, go-to item would be Lich Bane, I would say. So then for situational items, we have a few items we can cover. Zhonya, Rapid Fire Cannon, Banshees, Void Staff, and then I would say Magi as well. I'd say those are like the 5 items that, depending on the situation, I would go. So starting off with Zhonya. Zhonya has been a very OP item for a very long time, and I would say it kind of still is. If you know how to use the active properly, this item can literally win you team fights, and I mean team fights win games. So yeah, it gives you a lot of very nice stats as well. 120 ability power, it's a lot more than it used to give. 50 armor, so let's say I'm playing against a Zed mid lane, then I think Zhonya is a very nice item to have as well. The item doesn't give ability haste anymore, which is a bit sad, but I mean, if they would also give ability haste on this item, then I think it would be kind of broken. But like I said, the stasis you get from the active it can be game winning, like if you use it properly. So that's why I would say it's a very good situational item. Then for Rapid Fire Cannon, this used to be a go-to item on Twisted Fate back in the day. I'm not sure if it still is a go-to item, but I would say it definitely has regained a bit of its value. Although I'm not sure if you play 80 Twisted Fate, obviously this is kind of a go-to item. You want this in your build. But if you play AP Twisted Fate, I'm not so sure. I would say it's a bit more situational, because the only stat that you really want off of this item as TF is the movement speed if you play APTF. The other stats like attack damage, attack speed, and critical strike chance, while they're handy, I would say they're not really like, wow, okay, I want this on APTF. You know what I mean? The main reason why you would want to get Rapid Fire Cannon is because of the extra range you get from the passive. So by walking around, you stack your charges, and once you have like 100 of them, your next auto attack will have extra range. And since TF is W, counts as an auto attack, your W will have extra range. So you'll be able to throw a gold card at your opponent from like double the amount of distance, I think, almost. which is really nice if you play against, for example, a team comp that is very high range. So let's say you're playing against a Xerath mid lane and maybe a what's like a long range ADC, maybe MF or something like that, like something that like ults from far away. Then I would say rapid fire cannon is really nice, because those champions tend to not really walk into your face very much. Like if you would be playing against the Vayne ADC, Vayne is a lot lower range, so it's gonna be a lot easier to walk up to her and gold guard her, compared to a Misfortune who most of the time just sits back in a team fight and just waits for a good opportunity for her R, right? Another reason why you would maybe sometimes want to go rapid fire cannon is if your team doesn't have proper setup. So let's say you have a lot of champions in your team that, like I said, have no setup. So maybe you're playing with a Riven top lane, maybe you're playing with a Kindred jungle, maybe you're playing with a healing or like a shielding support, and then an ADC. So what these champions don't have any setup, right? They need someone else to start a team fight. Whereas if you would be playing with, for example, a Zac in the jungle, or maybe an Ornn top lane, or a Malphite top lane even, those champions can start a team fight, right? You don't have to be the one to make things happen. But if you play with champions that basically rely on you to hit a proper gold card or to start a team fight, then I would say rapid fire cannon is really nice, because it just makes it so, like I said, you have the extra range, so it's a lot easier to start a team fight. Those are like situations where I would consider buying a rapid fire cannon. And then for Banshee's Veil, I think this is kind of similar to Zhonya. So if enemy team has like Zhonya, you would buy Zhonya if they have a lot of AD, for example. If they have a lot of AP, I would buy Banshee's Veil. Kind of same stats as Zhonya, the same amount of AP. It's just instead of 50 armor, you get 50 magic resist, and then obviously you don't have the stasis in the active, but you get the spell shield. So if you play against like AP heavy comps, so AP mid laner, enemy AP jungler, maybe the top lane is like a Malphite who starts a team fight with his R, then having the shield as well is very handy. So those are like situations where I would consider going Banshee's Veil. So like I said, with these two items you kind of have to look at what the enemy, like what the main damage source from the enemy is. If they're mostly AD, then Zhonya. If they're mostly AP, then Banshees. Then Void Staff, I would say this is a very important item right now, because of the new AP items and because of the amount of like AP damage in the game. Like there's just a lot of like AP champions in general. There's people playing AP like mages in the bot lane again. There's people playing mages top lane. There's just a lot of AP champs in the game. Void Staff is really nice, because what tends to happen is, let's say you have an AP jungler and you have an AP in the bot lane as well, then you have 3 main AP damage dealers. So what is the enemy team gonna do? They're gonna stack a lot of magic resist, and that's where Void Staff comes in. So if the enemy team has a lot of magic resist, you want to get Void Staff so you can at least deal with some of the magic resist you're getting, so you don't lose as much damage, if you know what I mean. So yeah, that's when you want to get Void Staff. And then my final situational item would be Match Ice. So like I said before, if you have 10 Dark Shield stacks, you always upgrade to Match Eye. So you could even place this item like earlier on, right here. There's even some games, like let's say I have Rod of Ages and I have Ionian Boots and I have a fully stacked Dark Shield, I will get Match Eye before I buy Lich Bane. So as soon as you get 10 Dark Shield stacks, you upgrade to Match Eye, I would say. And then at 10 stacks you get the extra movement speed, which is really nice. So you will have to play a bit more cautious and a bit more safe to make sure you maintain the stacks. But most of the time, if you have 10 Dark Shield stacks, that means that you're quite ahead in the game anyway. So if you play properly, then you normally should not be losing this. You should not be losing the stacks. And then finally, for like late game items, I basically only have one item, and that's Rabadon's Death Cap. And then you could also put the elixir in here. So those are like items you will be getting very late into the game if you've basically bought all your items. I almost always tend to buy Rabadon as like my final item, so I won't really get it earlier. Main reason behind it is because of the passive, so it gives you 30% extra ability power. So if you would get it as a second item, you obviously don't really have a lot of ability power yet, so the passive kind of goes to waste in a way. I would say it's only really valuable if you already have a lot of AP items. And then the elixir, obviously you only really buy this item if you are really late into the game. Let's say before an important team fight, or maybe you're looking to push down certain lanes so you get the extra damage on the towers. Those are like 2 items you want to get later on in the game. So obviously these items can change throughout the season, right? It's gonna maybe nerf some items, maybe buff some items, so the item order and the core items might change. So therefore I would strongly advise you that if you watch this video on a later date, to check my MOBA Fair guide, which I will link in the description. So if you want like a proper updated setup, then you can go there and check out what I'm currently playing with. So then for summoners, this kind of changed actually. So for the past few seasons, I've basically always ran with Ignite and Flash, but since I think, I'm not sure when, but they buffed Ghost a while back, and I think at the moment Ghost is like kind of the go-to summoner spell. I think ever since they made it so your Ghost timer basically refreshes every time you get a kill or an assist, I think ever since then Ghost is, I would say, as good as Ignite, if not even better. I would say especially on Twisted Fate. So for example, with my previous setup in last season, I used to always build Night Harvester, and Night Harvester gave you movement speed for like if you hit abilities. So in team fights I would hit my Q or I would hit my gold card, and then I would get movement speed, and that would allow me to reposition for like follow-up stunts or just like reposition me in myself in general. But ever since they removed Night Harvester, I obviously don't have that movement speed anymore in team fights, and that's why I would say Ghost right now is, for me, I would say at least, a go-to option. So every time a team fight would start, I could pop Ghost and then walk up to my opponent, gold card them, we would kill them, I would get an assist, my Ghost timer would refresh, and I could walk up to the next opponent, or I could walk back, etc, etc, right? Ghost is also really good to set up ganks, I would say. So let's say your jungler ganks you. Back when you would run Flash Ignite, if your jungler would gank, you would often maybe flash on your opponent and gold card, and then with Ignite you would kill. But now when your jungler ganks, instead of flashing, you could maybe pop Ghost and just run at your opponent, and then they would often maybe flash, or they won't flash, and you gold card and you kill. It's just really nice for gank setups. Another way you could use this is, let's say there's a team fight happening bot lane and you don't have R, but you're in the river. You could pop Ghost to get to the fight earlier, etc, etc. There's several ways you could use this summoner spell to your advantage. So most of my games I tend to run Flash Ghost. I could actually show you. As you can see, like basically every game Flash Ghost, Flash Ghost, Flash Ghost. There's some games where I will run Flash TP, which we will get to right now. So teleport, I would say, it's really good right now, since you can teleport onto minions a lot sooner. It used to be, I think, at 14 minutes, if I'm not mistaken, but I think right now you can TP on minions a lot sooner, so therefore I would say it's a lot stronger as well. Since you run Ionians, you will have reduced cooldown on your teleport as well. Games where you want to take this, so for example you're playing against a heavy bully in lane, like a Victor, Orianna, Zerat, you know, at any champion that pokes you down in lane, where you basically have to force a recall, then I would say TP is very nice, because then you would be able to base and then TP back to lane and you won't miss any minions. If you would be playing against, for example, a Talon, you will be able to choose when you recall a lot more easily, because if you play the matchup properly, you should not be able to be such low health that Talon is gonna force you out of lane. You see what I mean? So that's kind of the reasoning you have to go for when you choose for your summoner spells. In terms of abilities, so the ability order is quite simple on TF, I would say, if you play AP. So you'll always max Q, then W, and then E, and then obviously R whenever you can. They did change the attack speed you get from E, so I'm not sure. I still have to kind of test whether it's maybe worth to go like 2 or 3 points in E before maxing W. But I would say for like myself, I've still been playing max Q, max W, and then max E, and it's been working fine for me. So pretty standard ability order, I would say. So that's it with like the runes and the build and the summoner spells. So now we'll be covering more of like the gameplay related aspects of Twisted Fate. I'll not be covering everything, just a few things that I think are important to know if you play the champion. Starting off with the laning phase. So in terms of laning phase, there's a few things I would say you want to keep in mind. The first and probably most important thing is your first recall. So your first recall you probably want to take at level 5, so you don't want to sit in lane till you're level 7, because then you kind of wasted your first ultimate opportunity, right? So you want to recall at level 5 at around 1.1k gold, and then you'll buy the items that I mentioned previously in the item sections. You'll walk back to lane, you'll get level 6, and then you'll look for your first R. So that's like your basically your goal throughout the first few levels in the laning phase. Is just getting to that level 5, getting that proper recall, and then getting back to lane with the proper items. Then the second thing for the laning phase, I would say, is like deciding whether you should harass your opponent or whether you should focus on getting minions. I think a lot of people play Twisted Fate like any other mid laner, where they'll just like focus on trading with their opponent all the time. Twisted Fate is probably one of the weakest laners in the game, so there is going to be very few cases where you're going to be able to out-trade your opponent. So I would say the best approach you can have if you play Twisted Fate is to just focus on getting as much CS as possible. But that does not necessarily have to mean that you should just let your opponent do whatever he wants, right? If your opponent mispositions, you should obviously punish them, but you should not be actively looking to punish your opponent. Your main goal should be on getting the minions. Also because you obviously have your passive loaded dice, which gives you extra gold for every minion you kill. Finally, I guess we could actually kind of tie this to laning phase as well as wards, so where you would place your wards. So for control wards, I normally tend to just place them in these bushes. And then trinkets, I would tend to place them up a bit further in enemy territory. So a good place for your trinket would so control ward would be like these bushes, these two, or even here. And then I think there's one bush around here. It doesn't show on this image, but those would be spots for like the control wards. And then for trinkets, you could place them like on enemy chickens or at the edge of this wall, at the edge of this wall, basically a bit more further into the river. So that's where I would place my wards, and that would also make it so your laning phase would be a bit more easy, because it will allow you to spot the enemy jungler or the enemy support when they're roaming. Then the second concept I kind of want to talk about is Twisted Fate's R usage. So the first thing I would say about Twisted Fate's R is the most important thing, that when you're using it is that you always try to push in your wave before ulting. In general, if you're able to do this, obviously. Because if you don't push in your wave, let's say your opponent is pushing in and you're gonna look to R, right? You ult bot lane and it fails. Now your opponent has this wave pushing in, so they're gonna be able to, first of all, you're gonna lose all the minions that he pushed in, and he's also gonna be able to get platings. So that's the main reason why you always want to like push in first and then look to our bot lane, if you're able to. Let's say you're playing against an Akshan who for some reason got 3 kills, and you can never get lane priority against him. He's always pushing in first, and you're never going to be able to push in first before ulting. Then you're going to have to be a bit more creative. So then you're going to have to maybe, yes, sacrifice waves, but then I would also be a bit more wary of like when I ult. So in those situations, if I would ult, I would be 90% certain that I'm gonna get a kill or an assist, because otherwise it would obviously not be worth it for me. Or at least I would be like, okay, my team is gonna get 2 or 3 kills, and then it would be worth it for me to let Akshan get the shove in and get a few platings. So it's always like in your head, you need to be always thinking about, okay, is it worth it for me to do this, yes or no? But in general, you want to try and always shove in your wave before ulting to a side lane. Then another little bit of a rule of thumb is cannon waves. So whenever a cannon wave is arriving, I always try to not ult, because a cannon wave is very valuable, gives you a lot of XP, it gives you a lot of gold. So I would only really ult on a cannon wave if, like I said previously, I know we're gonna get 2 or 3 kills and it's gonna be very valuable for my team, and where it's worth it for me to sacrifice the cannon wave. But if that situation does not really occur, if it's only like maybe 1 kill, or maybe I'm not even certain that we're gonna get the kill, because maybe, let's say I'm ulting bot lane and it's an Ezreal with cleanse, and I'm like, okay, if I ult there, Ezreal is just gonna cleanse, flash and E away, you know, then I'm obviously gonna stay mid for the cannon wave, right? So those are all things you have to think about all the time as well. In general, you want to stay mid lane when a cannon wave is arriving, because it gives you a lot of XP and gold. And then the next thing is basically playing towards your strong side. And what I mean by that is that you don't want to split your ult between all your teammates. So let me give you a quick example. So let's say we have a Vayne bot lane with a Lulu, and we have a Jax top lane. Vayne and Lulu already died twice, so they are already behind compared to their opponent, and our Jax has 1 or 2 kills. Who will I be playing towards? Some people would say, okay, top lane is useless, you always want to play towards bot lane, you always want to play towards this, you always want to play towards that. I would say it's probably in that situation more worth it to play towards the Jax, because first of all, Jax has a setup, so when you ult top lane, he's going to be able to follow up on your gold card with his stun from his dodge ability. And if I ult bot lane, Lulu and Vayne don't really have any CC unless Vayne is able to condemn the opponent into a wall. But what are the chances of that happening, right? So I would then probably almost always play towards the Jax. Another example, maybe with like the opposite side. Let's say we have a Riven top lane who already died 3 times, and she's playing against a tank Malphite with 3 kills and a lot of armor. And we have a trash bot lane with a Lucian, who are just even, right? Who will I be playing towards? Probably the Lucian and the trash, because even if I would get Riven a kill, Malphite is still gonna be an insane tank, and Riven is probably never gonna be able to really deal with him anyway. So then I would probably be playing towards the Lucian and the Thresh, because their lane is even, and if I can get them ahead, we actually have a higher chance of winning the game than if I would get the Riven that 1 kill. And even if she would get that 1 kill, I'm not certain that she's gonna get back into the game fully enough to carry, right? So those are like things you have to think about. Always try to play towards one side, and don't try to help everyone, you know what I mean? Like, I think as Twisted Fate players, you often tend to get the idea, oh, I need to make sure that everyone is fine and everyone is happy and I can help everyone. No, you can't. Play towards one strong side that's gonna allow you to win the game, and just ditch the other side if you have to. Those were all the Twisted Fate concepts I wanted to cover in this guide. I think I covered the most important ones. There's a million different other things I could talk about, but that would make the video way too in-depth and way too long. If you have any questions regarding items, runes, or any of the concepts I talked about, feel free to leave it down in the comments, and then I'll try to answer them to the best of my capability. So before ending the video, I would quickly like to let you guys know that I'm giving away a coaching session on my Instagram page. Details for that will be in the description. And then I hope you guys learned something from this guide, hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully I'll see you guys soon. Bye!